Out of Cruel Space into a Wider Galaxy, Part 51, for Newest England. There's something wrong. He's on a mission to find incriminating documents in Ambassador $At's chamber. He's got his invisible clothing, so that's all he needs. Something's wrong. He's standing on a carpet. Wait, why is that The presence of someone makes him turn, and for a moment it's an old man without the prayer beads of the continuum. And their form twists as blood and foam spreads from their mouth with a forest of teeth spreading. They twist and contort upwards and upwards into a feral Kador that pounces at him with a roar of. Dis twitches hard as he wakes up from his nightmare. The plush chair he had settled in when the excitement had died down and the last few dregs of the sleeping gas had soaked into his scales. A nap to clean it out had seemed like a good idea, but a nightmare was not helping. He runs a hand over his head and pulls at his feathers ever so slightly. This wakes him up a touch before he slaps himself in both sides of the muzzle to wake up further. The drug is designed to work against axiom effects, but is primarily an inhaled one. So the last few dregs of the dust that he had missed when cleaning himself just made him a little drowsy, but couldn't be dealt with by just throwing axiom at the problem. "Are you all right?" Philip asked, putting a hand on his shoulder. Dis suppresses an instinctive flinch. He looks around and Helen is here too, watching in concern. Mechi is tapping away at his communicator. The flashing lights say he's playing a video game with earbuds in. Being in that room with her, it was the most terrifying thing that I've ever been in. Even more than being caught by Ambassador Layla. She used a blunting effect on her tail, scooped me up with the blade, and tossed me out gently. Dizidin may be threats on a Kador scale, but the really dangerous races are just so damn calm. I've never seen one so angry, Dis explains. Yes, the galaxy is very blessed in that some of its most physically capable denizens are so calm and assured of themselves. But every now and then there is a reminder at just how dangerous they are, Philip remarks as he draws a pistol and holds it out for Dis to see. It's much like how people regard weapons. They see them so often in entertainment that it can surprise when you go a time only hearing a little pop from a game or movie. The actual bang can surprise or frighten. So this is a roundabout way of saying that Kadors are always that dangerous, and I had no problem with them before. No, there is a difference between a passive Kador and an enraged one, let alone one out of their mind in a berserk state. What I'm trying to say is that you just got a big reminder at how dangerous they can be, not how much they choose to be. And how is that supposed to help? We're miscommunicating a touch. My apologies, Philip says, tucking the weapon away and crouching down and closer to Dis's level. You've seen the most terrifying face of the Kador, and you handled yourself with aplomb. Now that you've done this, you can do even more. You've faced something you would have struggled to imagine before today, and you have a choice. A choice? What you face put the fear of Kadors in you. Do you let it rule you and fear them even when calm? Or do you use your fear to learn more about them and become stronger? Admittedly, one is easier than the other, but the easy road can often be the wrong one. Philip explains. That was easier to say. Well, pardon me for wanting to be thorough with my student, Philip replies, and Dis chuckles. Very, Dis says with a chuckle. He reaches up and touches a kutha stub in one of his ear frills. It shifts from blending with him to exposing him. You're that off balance? Philip asks, and Dis looks him right in the eyes. The golden reptile eyes meet Philip's deep brown. I have never been more afraid in my life. Not even you scared me that bad. I wasn't trying to scare you. The point stands. Is this what it's like to not be favored? To not be protected? Dis asks as Philip stands all the way up again. It's not usually so extreme, but there is a great deal more discomfort to not be under protection. You just got a good hard look at a very ugly side to things. While it coming out so easily in Brahmastra was very much unnatural, it's still entirely possible for any person of any species to be so driven to rage. I may have wiped that injury away with my healing meditations, but one of my oldest and most persistent aches came from such a person. I had already shot them multiple times, threw them to what should have been their doom 3 stories onto concrete, and hit them with my car. The sheer rage and drugs in their system kept them coming after me. They eventually buried a length of rebar into my shoulder before I got a shotgun slug through both his upper torso and his head in a single close-range blast. My ears rang for a month, my shoulder ached in all the years that followed, reminding me that an enemy isn't to be fully dismissed as dead unless they're a smear. Although slopes complicate that somewhat. Yeah, reducing a slime person into a puddle is both easy and nowhere near enough to stop them, Dis says before thinking. I watched those movies. I don't remember a case where you had someone drugged up and unable to feel pain. There was one about a guy with a bullet in his brain, though. Yes, that was a more redacted one. There's a bit of a battle against drugs back home, and learning that the right cocktail can give insane energy, complete pain immunity, and heightened aggression was not something that people wanted spread about, Philip answers. Yeah, an opponent that's berserk, immune to pain and doesn't get tired sounds like a nightmare. By the time he was finally dead of a shotgun blast, I had shot him repeatedly in the chest and stomach, cracked his skull, and broke half the bones in his body. He still nearly got me, Philip says and Dis grimaces. And you're still doing this shit? We all use our gifts as best we can manage. This is how I use mine. Freak, Dis teases. And proud of it, Philip just takes the insult like a compliment in the completely unveiled cloak and chuckles. Feel better? A little? Good. You're on your way then, Philip says. I'm going to be using Kador-shaped targets for a while, Dis says, and Philip chuckles. So do you know what caused this? You were doing some heavy research while I was with Vatas von Psychopath. It seems to be a super soldier program. You've heard of Modan Magi, correct? The undaunted probability adept? Helen asks when Dis takes a few moments. That's the man. He uses a technique that involves Gravia code to effectively expand his mind for a time. This lets him run the immensely complicated calculations required fast enough to keep pace with his tricks. Are you saying that swirling point in her aura was a Gravia? A malformed Gravia? Not exactly, but it's based off Gravia principles. The problem is that it doesn't matter how complicated or simple the physical structure of a brain is. It's a temperamental organ. Sure, it can bounce back from anything shy of immense physical damage if it's in small enough doses. But what the Vatras are suffering under is a constant, self-reinforcing feedback loop. The angrier Brahmastra gets the more battle-ready she is, and her modification making her more battle-ready is making her angrier. And it feeds into itself, Dis says. There are several variants, and we're seeing 3 among the 4 Vatras. Milena and Blythe have pattern recognition-based enhancements, turning one racist and the other paranoid. You've seen Brahmastra in an extreme feedback loop of her battle enhancement, and Shun's social enhancement made her able to ensnare the mind of men, but was rendered utterly addicted to them as she made them addicted to her. Philip explains. Are there other types? The information my contact dug up isn't complete. There are at least 4 types. I expect more. The problem is that a mental enhancement applied permanently is a problem. Despite the different physical structure between a human brain and those of the rest of the galaxy, both types of brain can produce all kinds of hidden psychosis or issues so small as to be invisible. As a result, even if these enhancements are perfectly applied with flawless precision, there can still be enormous side effects. Small issues leading to larger ones as they build up. Dis notes. Precisely, Philip says. Thankfully, there does seem to be a simple enough solution. Null? Helen asks. Not quite. We need a long-term solution so that their minds can heal properly. Null will just kill them as their own state of being will recreate the effect, Philip says before pulling out a small Kutha ring. Dis grabs it and examines it. This is a very precise restraint, allowing in only very specific axiom frequencies, the types that a Feely like Shun would use. Hopefully it'll break her addiction to that thing, Philip says, holding out his hand and showing he has a ring sized for a Yorgwa, a Koiran, and a Canador between his fingers. The people of Lavaron are still debating on how long they're to remain in prison for their crimes. But it won't be unusual for me to stipulate that they wear very specific axiom blocking rings during their sentence, with risk of having to restart it if they remove them. This way we can completely break the hold of the botched enhancement on these girls. Not bad, but then what? Dis asks. That depends on them, on whether I can convince them to not redo the effects on themselves. Why wouldn't they want that? Some people think the lows are worth the highs, Philip remarks. And seeing what they can do sometimes, I almost agree. Almost. If you can't feel pain, you're going to rip yourself apart. If you can hyper-focus on something, then you forget about other things. Even if there weren't any lows, the highs themselves have their own downsides. Philip explains before nodding. I've had to use some chemical assistance now and again, but it's always a tool of last resort for me. To be honest, I'm not even all that fond of basic painkillers you can get over the, Philip says. Isn't tea a stimulant, therefore chemical assistance? Helen asks in an amused tone. Madam, please, let me throw stones from my lovely glass house, Philip says in a joking tone. Anyways, both you and Helen have shown a great deal of initiative and skill in your mission with me. You've both proven that you're skilled enough that all you really need is seasoning. Experience is something that I can give, but you can get it anywhere. Really? Dis asks. Just like that? The basics are just that. The basics. You need to develop a distinct methodology, but you're patient, skilled, and willing to improvise, which are the most important things of all. If you both want to head by to the Undaunted to continue things there, then I have no protests. But Dis is the only one who interrogated a vatas. Not everyone has to be capable of everything. You're part of a team for a reason, and between the two of you there is no mission I would not trust you with. That said, I can continue to season and teach you both, but you've reached the point where you're ready, Philip says with a smile. I want to see how this ends, Dis says, and I'm not going to let Mr. See-Through one-up me like that. Helen replies, I see. Well, it looks like you two are going to help me further infiltrate the Gavali Empire in order to fully understand the danger of their soldiers and counter Captain November, a recipient of these techniques who now has a personal interest in Lavaron, Philip says. So the mission is? Reconnoiter and, if required, eliminate Captain November, preferably in a manner that does not bring suspicion upon Lavaron, Philip says, and then there's the sudden sound of music as Mechi pulls out an earbud. Hey, boss man. Yes, Mechi? What's the fourth type you know about? Of enhancement effects? Yeah, we got pattern recognition, battle ability, and social stuff. What's number 4? Observational. It's designed to counter spies and infiltration. I suspect Captain November will be undergoing that enhancement. So a test of our skills? Helen asks with a grin. And an observation of our own. From what my contacts have told me about November, she's liable to go unstable at a fast rate. She's known to be obsessive and vengeful as is. Couple that with suddenly receiving an insane amount of detail and data every waking and sleeping moment, and it's only a matter of time. I want to know how fast, and I want you two there to grab her and possibly save her. I beg your pardon? A life debt is a very solid way to make a new contact. Saving someone from a botched super soldier program is a good way of getting someone competent and informed on our side. And let me guess, if on the off chance she holds herself together, it's going to be a big test of our skills, Dis asks. Of course. Everyone knows spies can be an issue, so they set up counter-spy methods all over. Figuring out your way around them is important. I don't think this will be the fog machines and creaky wooden floors in some rooms on the Dauntless. Of course not, but that doesn't mean there aren't countless ways to counter spies. November's likely to use all of them. She can, but so long as you're quick to use your protein retreat buttons, you should be able to get out of anything without issue, and failing that, I'll come for you. And what will be left of wherever they're likely to hold us? Helen asks. That's entirely on them, Philip says, and Dis snorts before flicking his Kutha stub and fading back out of visibility. Out of Cruel Space into a Wider Galaxy, Part 52, for Newest England. I bet you thought you were so clever. Just because the information hasn't been acted on doesn't mean you're not talking to someone. So who is it? I want answers, Captain November screams at her as her assistant cowers in the corner, clearly intimidated and clearly terrified. That information could only have come from this part of the station, and you are the one responsible for maintaining it. Barley starts backing away as he needs to get the actual hell out. Something has set off November, and he believes it might be related to the Vatras, and a hand grabs him by the shirt and he's hauled up into November's frowning face. Delicate-looking Tret woman and shorter-than-average blood Sonir come face to face. Her eyes are manic, and the icy blue things are trying to outright drill into him. He starts letting out a distressed sound well and truly too high for her to hear. It outlines everything in his powerful hearing as he tries to find some way out that won't involve getting stabbed, shot, or something else by the clearly deranged November. Then her tongue is in his mouth, her fingers running down his fur, and she slams him against the wall as she presses herself against him and outright grinds against him. She breaks it off and looks at him breathily, then grabs him around the jaw. "You're mine now," she says, and drags him out of the logistical center. Philip says as he goes over the link. An automated protection he had set up with his contacts had come up with odd results. Effectively, every single hour, on the hour, a false message that wouldn't register as a message would be sent. It wouldn't be recorded in the device, and it would come right back. But it would also replicate itself for every other device it went to. If the number changed, then it meant that another device had been hooked into the contact network, meaning a weak point or a leak, or a subversion of the network. And Mr. Barley has an extra 4 devices. 1 is easily excusable, 2 can be understood, 3 requires immediate explanation, but 4? Clear subversion. His contact is compromised, or in danger, which means his students have their first mission, to ascertain the exact status of Assistant Quartermaster Barley. After all, as little as the man knows, he's still part of Philip's network. Too valuable to simply let go without a word. He hadn't enjoyed being captured himself, especially after they took his cyanide capsule, and barely doesn't even have one of those. Helen, if you both are feeling able and active, I have something for you both. Top priority, he says, pressing a special little button on his indicator. Time to get talking and then moving. What already? Dis asks as he's handing a profile. We will have to head into Empire territory and check on a contact. Their communication networks has suddenly included 4 more contact points, which means he's been compromised somehow. Philip explains, and both cloak and glance at each other. Or seem to, as Dis isn't wearing a hat. Philip has to go with his suit's collar shifting. Is cutting this contact off just out of the question? Believe me when I say that your contacts always know more about both you than you've given them. There are very many, very easy ways to guess what someone's doing. The most obvious being simply knowing what information the contact was sharing. With that alone, the Gavali Empire will be paying far more attention to us and might start thinking that rushing the war station might be worse, despite the casualties it would inflict. We cannot directly resist them. And if they find out that we're willing to counter their anti-spy efforts, to be frank, from what we've uncovered about the Gavali Empire, anything could set them off. The mental enhancement seems to be a mistake they're intent on continually making, Philip replies. The problem is that I suspect he's in the grasp of a very unstable individual. And to be frank, while it's unlikely my contact knows anything dangerous or overly incriminating, he knows that someone is very curious about the Empire. And he knows that my focus was the vatas, which means he can be linked to what's happened to us, and thanks to my seizing of power, directly to me. It's excuse enough to attack if they're looking for one. So is the priority to silence him or extract him? Priority 1 is to ascertain whether he's compromised or not. If he's held captive, we extract. If he's compromised, we compromise the evidence he has against us. Pardon? We plant incriminating evidence on him? Sir, Philip says. We frame him? No, we shoddily frame ourselves, Philip says, and Dis and Helen pause. What? We shoddily frame ourselves. Philip replies. Yes, but why? Wait, a shoddy frame job can get the real evidence thrown out with the fake. Precisely, rampant paranoia and pattern recognition go hand in hand with their enhancements. A smart enemy and a stupid enemy can make much the same mistakes. If they're working from tainted information, the smart one just makes the mistake sooner. So we taint the information, Philip says. All right, but how do we get there in time? That's the downside, travel time. Philip confesses. Are you two in? Yes, Helen asks. Duh, Dis replies. Very professional. Come along, you two. It's 2 hours to the edge of the system and 20 hours from this system to the base where Barley is stationed. Is anyone else coming? A few people, Philip says. A few? The sound of an explosion and the puff of smoke makes Dis and Helen cough as Philip wrinkles his nose and turns the atmospheric scrubbers to a slightly higher setting. Out of the thick smoke, the tiny figure of Mechi staggers out, covered in black residue. He then grabs at his eyes and lifts them up and off to reveal them as goggles, giving him an amusing reverse raccoon eyes effect. Well, that didn't work, dare I ask? Basically trying to speed up that protein printing trick makes things really smoky. It wasn't even much of an explosion. Barely enough to blow your nose, but loud and a lot of smoke. Mechi says, looking back into the workshop he just sullied. Thank every god out there for cleaning drones. Indeed. How did you get the methodology to artificially produce protein? It was only vaguely mentioned to me. You're a spy I work for. Yes, but the original laboratory is destroyed. Have you been digging into the personal lives and files of our allies? Yeah, but I was just making sure that things weren't going to go pear-shaped. Kindly restrain yourselves from making enemies out of our allies, Philip states. So another adventure, bossman? You going to need me? Mechi asks. I'd like you along in case we need someone more skilled than I at hacking and mechanical details, Philip replies, and Mechi grins. All right, so when do we go? As soon as possible. Barley was stepping lightly. Crazy or not? Dangerous or not? Captain November was a damn attentive lover, and she had wrung him out in the best way possible. If that was the standard, then no wonder so many men lived their lives without even thinking about leaving the company of their wives. God damn, everything was. Why is Philip here? The insane man was. The dining area at the station was public, and what in the actual hell was he doing here? Barley starts walking up and scratches his jaw a bit to cover his mouth. Are you crazy? Not at all, a woman's voice says. They know I'm a cloaken, and I've shifted my face so many times as my focus shifts that they know I'm just copying whatever has my interest. And then she turns to him, and she suddenly looks exactly like him. She offers him a seat, and Barley starts sweating. She gestures to the other seat. I'm working with Philip, though. My wandering around with his face on is to buy him time as a distraction. I'm filling them with clearly false positives, so they'll throw out the good with the bad, she says without her mouth seemingly moving. My name is Helen, I work for Philip, and you have been compromised. What? Barley demands, and she gestures for him to sit. He's got a system that detects if there are new links in his communications. If it's not on his end, and not in the infrastructure due to protein use, then that means that there are additional devices listening to yours, Helen explains as he sits. Her form shifts into a drone with a shinning black shell as she looks up towards a commercial with several such Dryanas actors in it. Oh, that's why she did that, Barley realizes. Wait, how can I trust you? From 2 to the 4 to the 6 to the 8, Helen sings as she holds up and indicates the news she'd been reading with Philip front and center as her form shifts back to his. During all of this, her lips are not matching up to what she's saying, likely to throw off any cameras trying to read lips. Hindsight is 20/20, Barley replies. How thorough. There are 4 additional pings on your end. How many, if any, are from you adding more devices? None, Barley replies. By the way, do you know what the passcode means? The numbers add up to 20, but the first part means nothing, just a silly bit of math. You can easily guess what the second half means. Yes, I can. I suppose it makes more sense for passwords to make no sense. Barley notes, wait, if you're here providing distractions for Philip, where's Philip? Covering your trail, smoking his and setting things up, Helen says, and he nods before her images speaks much more, and he tilts his head. He's putting in evidence to make it look like you're being framed by someone else to spy for us. He's using supplies from another minor hotspot in the Empire. This way, they'll throw the baby out with the bathwater. Barley says from behind his hands as he rests his elbows on his, anyways, the microphones around here aren't very powerful, so flinch right now, please, she says, and he jerks back a little. Thank you. You should get going now. If you look angry at me, all the better. He flares his nostrils and then stands up and then stomps away on all 4s. A lot of Sunir don't like knuckle walking unless they have to, but he doesn't care. Don't you think this is a little blatant? Dis asks as he tucks a bunch of taped-together newspaper cuttings reading out death to the vatas under Barley's crash couch covers, but not all the way. A few switches out, and a very, very sloppy frame job has been put up. It's finished off with a device tucked into the back gap of the couch. That's kind of the point. This needs to look like a disposable pawn was sent in to frame someone up. You don't dispose of your best, so it needs to be slapdash, Philip says. And Helen is buying us time? The fun part of a person who's expected to look like other people is that it's perfectly acceptable for her to kick off a few false alarms if she's suddenly going around looking like a criminal, Philip says. Yeah, I have cousins who got into a lot of trouble. They had an obsession with serial killers and kept kicking off a panic. And later she got slammed for aiding and abetting when she accidentally confused the police actively looking for one of the killers she decided to look like, Philip notes. Yeah, that was a fun conversation to overhear. Dis reminisces as he tosses the remains of a destroyed data chit into the corner. There had been numerous messages in the local language and made reference to a dozen worlds deeper in the Empire. Are you certain they'll pick up on that one? We have extremely capable but unstable individuals against us, and there are axiom effects that can fix things with even the data inside. It's not unreasonable to expect them to use something like that. And when they do, they'll trust the information because it looks like we already went as far as reasonably expected to hide it, Philip says. Now, time to go. Activate recall beacon. A trinity of buzzes from her communicator causes Helen to smirk under her disguise. She looked up to a nearby view screen and goes from looking like Philip to looking like a Tret singer, and she pays for her drink and gets up to leave. Her image shifts a dozen times as she crosses the area, and while looking like a Horgua, she gives out a massive jaw-crackingly deep yawn. Out of Cruel Space into a Wider Galaxy, Part 53, for Newest England. So it's the waiting game? Dis asks as all four of them are at a dinging table. The station was semi-public. The support staff to keep it alive was civilian, despite it being a border station with a military port and complex as part of it. And since a good chunk of the station was civilian, it meant that it was inevitably part of the tourism industry in some way, meaning a group of strangers didn't raise too many eyebrows, especially as how Dis, Mechi, and Philip were all in disguise as women. They didn't even warrant a second glance. So how is Barley getting out of this? Easily enough, it seems. The good Captain November is trying to find her balance when she can now see conspiracy everywhere. The inability to tell treachery from someone having a strong friendship or a side job or any number of other things has her thoroughly off his scent. Mostly. She's assumed he's harmless due to male prejudice. So with a shoddy frame job on top of that, looky, here comes Barley, Mechi says, and Philip nods despite the indicated direction being directly behind him. Yes, I assumed he'd slip out of trouble. Captain November is a fierce foe, currently in the middle of a confusing and likely quite frightening transformation that is causing her to doubt everything and reevaluate the entire world around her. Isn't that right? Philip asks as he turns to regard Barley. Is what right? Barely asks, and Philip motions for him to join them. That November, while seeing more, is getting overwhelmed by data and unable to properly sort it in the here and now, meaning that the poisoning of the well we did in your quarters was brought up and all suspicion on you was dropped. Well, if it wasn't, then they're not letting me know, but it was brought up and I was shown a whole smackload of honestly confusing things. Why didn't you tell me that you were smuggling things into my room like that? So that you would be honestly surprised and confused at what you were seeing. They cannot hear your thoughts. However, they can read your aura and body language. Confused and wondering why that was there and who exactly put it there and for what purpose is exactly what you needed to feel and exactly what you showed them. That more than anything else will have thrown them off. You know those movies have you a lot more guns blazing than this, Mechi protests. That's because the movies are designed to entertain, and there's very little entertaining about me laying down with a sniper scope for so long that I get a nasty cramp and other such long, dull, and very, very necessary duties. Generally, there's about 3 hours of dull work for every second of excitement. And that's if you're in the exciting part of spycraft. For every crazy fool like me or my students, there are at least 10 others filing paperwork, researching, getting materials to where they need to be. Or people like me who are completely normal but have a friend they're willing to talk to. Barley says, and Philip points at him with a smirk. A smirk that looks somewhat odd on Snick's face, but works. How are you going to get away with that, by the way? Barley asks, reaching out to poke one of the blade arms. To his surprise, his finger meets something solid in the illusion. Now, it's rude to ask what a lady looks like, Bear, Philip chides him. He's got a pack on with the blade arms and wings connected to a control band on his forehead. Some of my better work, Mechi says. Mechi, for shame. You never reveal a lady's secrets, Philip chides as he pulls out a paper fan and covers his disguised face to hide the amused grin. Not fooling me, I can see you smiling. The treacherous Dis notes and Philip scoffs. There's some laughter around the table, and Barley looks around a touch. Something wrong? Mechi asks. He's looking for cameras. Yeah, I've seen their specs. They're all over the place but cheap, so the microphones won't work well in a crowded area. You need to be basically speaking to them in order for them to pick anything up, Barley says. That's the downside of a military. They're very expensive. In fact, most things about running a society would drain the pocketbook of the wealthy in short order. Even some of the wealthiest women alive would struggle to fund a single world and all its amenities, Anchor, Philip says as his eyes flicker to the nearest 3 camera locations without altering his illusion. As such, the officials in charge are often forced to use lower quality equipment than they would like, or indeed lower quality than is sufficient many times. No matter how much they have, it's never enough. Something has to give somewhere, and that's where people like us enter. The illusions refusing to synchronize with our actual words garbles our speech for any lip reader, and the microphones are too weak to hear us. Won't they think it's gibberish and find that odd? Mechi asks, and Philip gives him a stern look. Oh, I shouldn't have set mine to gibberish, should I? No, Philip says before scanning the area. Thankfully, the cameras that can focus on your mouth are at a good distance, and if I recall correctly, they don't have the most powerful zooming ability. They do not, there's just a huge number of them, Barley states. I'm the 4th set of eyes on things moving into the station. 2 of them are computer logic trees, so I'm just a rubber stamper. But I can tell you they have a lot of those cameras constantly coming in, which means they're spying somewhere, or the cameras have a very short working life. Or both. Cameras that are easily damaged can bring a false sense of security to a target who thinks they got everything, but you're just replacing all sorts of obvious ones cheaply and distracting them away from how you're actually monitoring them, to say nothing about cannibalizing them for parts. Sometimes equipment is of higher value than it actually is sold for, and it was merely put together poorly. A bit of work, and something works a lot better. Like JegTech stuff, it wastes a lot of power and time in the growling thing, but with just a little tweaking it can fire off fast and ready? Mechi asks. Exactly. Many people take certain flaws as features, Philip says before gesturing to Mechi. Many warrior races would find being so small a hindrance, but you could easily set up a sniper's nest anywhere and can use much more for cover. Couple that with Axiom and how powerful weapons are, and you're a deadly force on the field that's hard to spot and harder to hit with your stature. Damn straight, especially if I bring in my turrets of doom, Mechi declares. Oh, calm down already. You look like a fool. Dis says, and Mechi blows a raspberry at him. Yes, how very terrifying. Focus somewhere else. Barley's clearly cleaving to his own, Captain November said. Her head is throbbing. There is too much everything. All the lights are too bright, even when dim. All the sounds are too loud, even when soft. Everything is too much everything. And her uniform, normally so comfortable and perfectly tailored, feels like a restraint jacket designed to hold her up. Everything about everything is pounding at her like a mallet. There were terrible imperfections all around her. About herself, about the women in the office, about the empire, about everything. Hell, it was why she dragged the boy off for some fun. Her whole life, men were great yawning unknowns she couldn't understand. And then she realizes that he's just a person and wants it almost as much as her. She had her fun, she burned for more, but more importantly, she had to figure out where. Where? Where? The leak was. It was infuriating, and it was clearly active, as not long after she had started bugging everyone's communicators and trying to work it from that angle. Someone had tried to frame Assistant Quartermaster Barley Steep Dive. or steep dive barley, in the traditions of his branch of the Saunier. It was immensely frustrating. A hidden opponent dancing around her, and to make matters worse, her main suspect had been spotted numerous times in station, due to more than one cloaken reading through the news reports with interest. Like any kind of public figure, his image was out there, and with the damnable disguise masters catching glimpses of him, they were getting dozens of false positives every single hour. The problem with the news cycle, a handsome man declaring himself the new lord over a lost world of the Empire, in the name of what appears to be a defunct and defanged empire in cruel space? Most interesting, the paltry few thousands of years of the country had been so rife with war and drama that the news was at risk at becoming the English History Hour. Damnable apex, they just can't sit still and calm the hell down. November mutters under her breath as the security feeds pick up another glimpse of the white and red roses from the Lancaster and York families that became the Tudors at the end of it. It had everything: drama, treachery, bloody war, exotic locations and peoples, before ending in a marriage with an implied happily ever after, like some saccharine child's show. Except factual, somehow. Humans are crazy. Of course, things had also tied into looking up who the human was, and then things got weirder. The declassified files being made into public entertainment. The implication that the actual missions were even more absurd. More absurd than glides surviving away from an orbital laser. More absurd than enduring over a year of torture, never breaking and then recovering enough within just a couple of days to go off on a massive self-issued mission. Using nothing but raw gambling ability to bankrupt a crime lord? Absurd, but verifiable, somehow. Which meant that any possible avenue of attack had to be considered. She was slowly going through everything, but as the only blessed on the station, she had to figure it out. A snarl of a riddle for a mind with nigh divine levels of insight. Part of her new cognition was prodding at her, bothering her, testing her, and that little shit, November realizes. Send a squadron. Arrest former assistant quartermaster Steep Dive and everyone with him. Ma'am, are you? Now! Yes, ma'am. Pity. Philip notes beneath his disguise as he sees security start to appear near entrances and exits. What's wrong? We've been found out. Philip replies. It appears we have underestimated the enhancement on Captain November. So what do we do? Barley asks in a strained and terrified tone, clearly trying not to openly panic, but panicking regardless. What do? We escape. All of us. But what good am I? You're loyal and daring enough to be a spy for me. That's useful. Besides, if I leave you, there's no telling what they'll get out of you, Philip says. So no, you're coming with us and going to have a long, prosperous, and likely boring career. What will they tell my family? Likely that you've been kidnapped in the hopes of them leading to you, Philip says. I'm afraid you'll have to cut contact for a time. It's possible to get a message to them, but it has to be in some form of code they can understand, and it will take a while to reach them in a roundabout way. Expect 3 months. I think I understand. Good. Is there anything you'd miss in particular if we were to leave it behind? I may or may not have been trying to make a special communicator that's not up to legal specs. I have some audio recordings on it. My airing out my thoughts, Barley says as he looks around and spots the security. We're penned in. No, we're not. They just think we are. Is this modified communicator anywhere specific? Is it hidden, or would Captain November have it? Philip asks, and Barley shakes his head. She wouldn't have it on her person. The modification will buy us time, but not much. I made its plugs and connectors all customized, and there was a hidden trap in things. But if they're taking things slow and careful, they'll get around all of it for sure. Oh, and it's got a pair of shock prongs too. So it's an emergency weapon. Well done. I can see that we get you to Lavaron. You and Mechi will have a wonderful friendship, or stirring rivalry. Either way, Philip says as he rises up and adjusts the buttons on his suit as he does so. The illusion is still strong on him, and he nods to Barley. Now then, you are with me. Helen, you and Dis are to bring Mechi back to our ship, our actual ship and not the one we swapped IFFs with. Prepare for takeoff and prepare the chaff worm for upload. Got it, Helen says as Dis vanishes entirely, and an invisible hand grabs Mechi, who's then gone too. You ready for this? Philip asks Barley, who swallows loudly, but nods. Capital. Out of Cruel Space, Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 54. For Newest England, things got hectic fast. The moment the guards spotted Dis, Helen, and Mechi pulling a disappearing act, they started moving, and Philip was already in motion at that point. The spy had the table and chairs heading towards the nearest guards, and had grabbed Barley by the back of the shirt before shifting. They come to a stop in a crowded area without much light, and there's a bit of quiet shifting around so they don't get tangled up with each other. Maintenance hallway? Barley asks in a very low tone. Philip nods. Just whisper. I can pick up your heartbeat from 20 paces. Whispering is fine. Calm down. This will end well. Now, from my understanding, there's a computer lab not far from here. We'll check there for your communicator. They won't take it to that one. They'll have taken it to the black site. This place has a black site? A black light using lab, yes. Okay. We clearly mean different things when we say black site. Still, lead the way. We're in the primary left maintenance hallway of Sector 7. So the hallway a little way off the food court? Got it, Barley says as he starts to shuffle along. Well, pardon me for using the official name for things, Philip states as he follows after his contact. Lock down the main hangars and scramble every guard we have on reserve. The station's been infiltrated by hostile powers, and I will not have them escape. November roars out as she scans as many screens as possible to try and locate them. Ma'am, there are civilian protests at us disrupting traffic. Already? This station bows to the military, not the other way around. Keep up the lockdown and lock up any idiot that tries to make a fight out of it, she snaps. Now, where are they? Two are cloaking. They can just vanish. But they took the small one with them. All of them were in a disguise of some sort, so I have to assume the little cove was something else. Potentially a double bluff, but no, I doubt it for this scenario. More concerning is the one that was disguised as a snikt. She, likely he if my suspicions are correct, was clearly being deferred to in some way, and they were not a snikt in truth, as Barley had poked the blade arm and was surprised to find resistance. It was likely that damnable human, but there was no way to be certain. But where had they vanished to? Everywhere but the toilets and private quarters has cameras in it. So where are they? Then it snaps into place. There is another place without cameras because no one wants to go into them. They are dark, cramped, and uncomfortable. They are everywhere and lead everywhere. Do we have any sensors in the maintenance tunnels? She asks. Pressure gauges, thermal readouts, and electrical sensors. Give me a readout, because that's where they are, and it doesn't matter how sneaky they are. They're going to disrupt them. Get the guards to start opening them and searching them all. We have moving targets, and they have two objectives. First is to grab anything that may be of value that steep dive we might have. Second is to escape. Keep the lockdown up and triple the guards around Laboratory Black 23. Post several inside as well. I'm going to armor up. Little girl is on the ball, Philip says with a smirk as the panels in front of him and Barley start being opened and he grabs onto the Senior. Don't make a sound. He pulls the Batman close and steps backwards into the structural support between the panels. He pulls an axiom to fade out of sight and then works to blend it. The panel they were under opens and the guards examine it. They come close, but Philip has had the seconds he's needed to blend the axiom, just enough to be glossed over, and the panel behind them is opened. Then he starts moving slowly under the stealth technique and brings Barley with him. Stay calm, Philip says so quietly even he can't hear it, and he senses Barley force himself to stop shivering so much. The boy just has no training for this kind of thing, and will likely need a fairly urgent nap after they've gotten him onto the escape shuttle. We're doing just fine. Let the search pass over us, and we'll be fine, Philip says in the same inaudible to himself level as they reach the place between the support struts into Barley's utter disbelief leads them out into the hallway. Completely invisible, yes, but still tangible and capable of being crashed into. Then before Barley can question it, a swarm of drones shoot through the hallways. After they pass, Philip moves them back in before the guards return to slam the panels back into place. After they leave, Philip lets out a mildly audible chuckle. Fun, isn't it? he asks as he lets go of Barley, who lets out a big breath of relief. It's intense, Barley says. It's not for everyone. Still, I learned to love it myself. And is it any wonder people are starting to consider humans as universally crazy? Barley snarks. Come on, you hunk of junk. The programming is simple. November growls out as the visor downloads the program and turns it on before putting it on. She's in one of the black site labs and turns to the side. Then she smiles as the visor detects the acid in the cloned human's digestive tract, despite the numerous barriers in the way. Perfect. I'll find the fucker with this. She activates her stealth suit and fades out of sight. One hexagon at a time. Unlike normal stealth techniques, this requires no more focus than a naturally invisible cloaking provides. It takes all the extra thought and focus out of her hands so she can just shred the bastards. All forces, this is Captain November. One of our opponents is a suspected human. Use chemical scanners and rescan all areas. Do not allow any doorway to open without 10 guns and 2 scanners pointing at it at all times. We are not letting these fools escape. I see. Things are shifting, Philip mutters as panels of the maintenance hallways are being torn off again and scanners are being thrust in and waved around. Clever. He grabs onto Barley once again and cloaks them both before twisting Axiom as subtly as he can, and they shift several sections down to the nearer end of the hallway. Technically past the maintenance ladder they need to use, but also past the scanners. They then start moving back, and he starts them up the ladder and stops them just barely between floors as the drones shift past on both levels. We're too high now, Barley mutters. I'm aware, however, they're going to pay more attention to the floors with the labs on them. We'll move faster here, move closer, and slip in. And they do. The moving is still cramped and broken up by the guards checking and rechecking. But they quickly find a pattern to it, and by the time they're over the labs, Barley has even grown comfortable with things. All right, time to take a look at the labs below. Did you use Proton in the experimental communicator? I did. Good. Proton is valuable, but limited in its use to communication technology and currency, Philip says, pulling out what looks to be a short tube with a tiny scanner on the end. He plugs it into his communicator, and it begins stretching downwards and scanning. 7 sources in the room below, 4 of them at the height in configuration to suggest guards with communicators, 2 of them right next to each other at a lower level. Coins, 1 on a table, similar size and configuration to the ones higher up, meaning a communicator. Which means that, Barley begins to say before Philip shifts backwards and drags Barley with him. They barely dodge the swipe of a plasma sword. Take this and get your communicator, Philip says, pressing an item into Barley's hand as he also draws out a pistol, and then there's a twisting sensation and Barley is teleported down onto the next floor down. The guards turn to him and raise their weapons, and he lets out a high, keening squeal in fear. Then a laser beam crashes against him and does nothing as the chunk of Kutha in his hand warms ever so slightly. He slams his way out of the maintenance hallway and boots the chunk of metal towards where he can sense the heat of the plasma sword. The panel is sliced in half by a burning blade that is then doused to hide it again. An invisible foe that can see him. Well, that can see his illusion. He still looks like a snick like this. So you are human, a human male, according to this scanner. Well played. His opponent states, and Philip's eyes narrow. Then he darts to the side and activates the wings on his pack and hovers in the air while drawing a bead on where the heat of the sword is coming from and lays off a salvo as he also rushes. He dodges back at the swipe of the blade and then grabs her weapon hand to hold it away. They compete for the weapon for a moment as he steps into her space to unbalance her. Then he engages the wings again and slams her into a wall before burying his knee into her stomach. It's reinforced so it has minimum effect. He then slams the top of his head into her face and feels a visor there. The blow jostled the equipment ever so slightly, and then he activates the false blade arms to wrestle the visor off as he grabs it with one of the false arms. You bastard! She snarls as he manages to get her visor into the plasma blade she's still holding activated. The device fades into full visibility as it breaks into pieces against the sheer heat. She throws him back, and the blade swings, and while Philip dodges well, pieces of his snicked imitation pack get sheared away. A quick movement, and the rest of the pack is flying right at her, and she's forced to dodge. "What are you made of?" she demands. "More than you can handle," Philip says, taking out and throwing down a smoke bomb. "You think this is going to hide you from me?" November demands, and then a reinforced leather shoe slams into the side of her knee. She screams as it becomes obvious he's using the smoke not to hide himself but highlight her. So she retreats backwards, trailing some few wisps of smoke, and brings out another weapon. It's clear that he's too dangerous in close range to take it that distance. But where is Barley? "Oh God, oh God, oh God," Barley pants out. He had gotten his communicator quickly, and even the few parts that they'd pulled out of it. He'd put it back together to try and calm down as he hid behind a lab table as lasers soared overhead. The Kutha chunk was shoved into his underwear to keep it on him without needing to use his hands, and it was starting to feel panic as the occasional shot caused the protective totem to heat up more and more. He hurries to put it all back together because he can hear the girl coming. One of the guards is trying to sneak up on him, and when it comes to trying to one-up a Sonir, you need to be intangible, as nothing else will work with echolocation being a thing, an important thing. The power surges through the taser part of the communicator, and the twin prongs flick out of the top. Barley has no time as he rams the device to the side, and there's a scream as the guard that had been sneaking up at him flails and throws herself into a nearby table. "Shit! Shit! Shit!" Barley mutters as he starts crawling away as the guards start spreading out to try and get him in another way. Of course, they're just not sneaking up on him because he's got the oldest. And to be honest, one of the most reliable forms of radar is just part of his biology. He gathers Axiom into his throat as a backup as a guard pounces on him and holds the taser away. They get a sonic scream beyond their ability to hear that batters their everything until they slump over. Barley pockets the communicator and wrestles the weapon out of the guard's hands. He holds it up to take aim, and "Access denied," the weapon chimes cheerfully. "Fuck!" he exclaims before hurling at the nearest guard and getting them to dodge ever so slightly. The concussive sound of a rail shot from the level above tells him that things aren't going so hot for Philip either. The man's fast, but is he supersonic? Out of Cruel Space into a Wider Galaxy, Part 55, for Newest England. The shot blisters the air as it sails past him, the wind shear of the projectile alone enough to tear his jacket and bruise the skin beneath. If he hadn't taken a leaf out of Little Herbert's experimental playbook, that would have reduced his chest to chunky salsa. As it is, however, it's given him a straight line to her location. He doesn't squeeze the trigger. He's not crass. He caresses it like gentlemen. And the floor panels where the previous shot came from shatter as the bullet continues down and crashes into the lab below, scaring the ever-loving hell out of who's down there, but from the sounds of it, not killing anyone. There were only 3 screams, and one was Barley, which means the young pup is doing very well for his first time, and those were screams of shock, not pain. So it was just a momentary distraction. "Keep it up, Barley. You're doing well," he calls down while shifting, and right before a short-range teleport. The nerds were trying to get it called a blink when it's short-ranged. Philip understands it as a video game reference, but the name is actually all right. A short distance moved in a blink. Be it speed or a teleport, it works. Another blink on top of the previous one, and he's completely scrambled his position. He knows this because the rail shot from November is currently careening into the bulkhead door at the end of the hallway, even as the sound of the shot finally reaches him. Thankfully, he still has eyes, and like all invisibility methods, hers has flaws. Movement. But it's so well covered that her comparatively slow movements are still veiled. But the rail shot? Plain as day, and while it may be faster than the sound of its approach, it's not faster than the sight of its approach. He can still dodge. There's a sense of screaming danger, and he shifts to the side. Another rail shot tears at him and leaves a line of bruising from its wake alone. This one across the chest instead of at the shoulder. He responds by reaching for the grenades and reminding himself of the trick with a little mnemonic. Harmonic adjustment and direction. He throws the grenade, and it vanishes as it leaves his hand. Blink and you miss it. Rail shot follows soon after, But the bang of the grenade follows that in a scream of rage and pain from November. Teleporting grenade throws are unfair and something he's in total support of. That scream was November, Barley realizes as he scrambles from under one table full of lab equipment to another. Come on, Steep Dive, this is stupid! What could possibly be worth going against the Empire? Do you have any idea what's going to happen? One of the guardswomen asks. Same thing that would have happened if I farted around the wrong person? Barley asks sarcastically. But his own question actually starts to get to himself. He was just being sassy, but something like that had happened. If the nobles of the Empire decided they didn't like you, then you were basically dragged in for high treason. Even if you never so much as looked at them. It didn't happen often. Most people were too scared to do anything to get them that pissed off. But the early examples they had made, he can work with this. I mean, let's be honest. When the penalty for being suspected of treason is just as bad as for treason, then there's no real reason not to. Wait, shit, that wasn't the right thing to say. You're full of it. Oh, am I? Funny, isn't it, that so many people have been locked up for questioning in no time at all at November's command. She went from heading a scout ship to a power high so fast that she's pushing to set a record or something. He's kind of right. She went for a promotion and came back damn near psychotic. Look at how many others are like that, all over the Empire. Everyone's going crazy. Pardon the hell out of me for wanting things to be better, Barley protests, and a single laser beam barely grazes his ear. He's still not hurt, but the Kutha totem he's shoved into his underwear heats up a little before quickly cooling. He needs to move that, but he doesn't know if he needs direct skin contact for it. Try to tell me that it's not a fucking pattern. The moment the Empire trusts someone, it's a damn countdown until they're chewing on the walls. They all go crazy sooner or later. You've seen it. Something is broken. Something is rotten. A pinpoint laser blast that lets him know that he's not fooling the guards as to where he is. They're just trying to avoid killing him or demolishing the more delicate lab equipment. Shut the hell up! You're just making excuses to try and save your hide. Does it make me wrong? Does it make the many, many commanders, captains, and other high-end officers suddenly not crazy? Barley rants out, just letting his mouth run. I spoke to a friend about a concerning trend in the Empire, and suddenly I'm a traitor to it and have to run. Am I not even allowed to see or speak about what's wrong? Are my words alone a crime? So you confess to divulging state secrets? What secret? Any idiot with eyes and ears can see there's a problem. Barley protests. To go against the Empire is treason. Is a surgeon going against a patient by cutting out rail shot or shrapnel? Is a metalworking factory going against metal itself for melting and beating minerals into a useful shape? Oh, we have a real patriot here. Then why don't you let us see what's on that communicator of yours? According to the electrician who was in here before we cleared her out, the damn thing has custom connections and prongs that are completely non-standard. That must have taken a while to make. Designed especially to stop someone from just removing the memory drive and looking through all your secrets. And just like that, you validated their need. You've made them completely necessary. Don't turn this around. You're only using something like that if you have something to hide. Considering that having an even slightly unfavorable opinion on the crazies in charge can get you killed, you can bet your sagging ass I won't let anyone hear my innermost thoughts. He snaps back. My new boss might be weird, but if I told them to their face they look like a damn idiot was dragged up and down the hypercrete of a dam and beaten with the ugly stick for good measure. I'll get chided for being childish with my insults at worst. I say even half that to someone like what November has become, and I'll be taking a short walk out an airlock. There is no return fire. He exposes his left wing by pointing up to the hole in the ceiling. Listen to that above us. She's using fucking rail shot in a space station. She attacked with a plasma blade while we were in the maintenance tunnels, shredding the infrastructure. How much time and effort will catching me and my boss take? Because at this rate, she'll break the station before she's satisfied. Hey, don't try to turn this on her. You're the traitors here. Are you defending her because you think she's a bang-up officer in full control of herself? Barley begins before the concussive bang of a railgun going off interrupts him. Or because you don't want to be her target? There's a very different kind of bang and a series of swearing before a strange, distant hissing sound. Then something shifts ever so slightly in the axiom, and something lands on the table above Barley. Thank you so much for advocating for my character. Now, as Miss November the trigger-happy is choking on that cloud, I think it's time we made our exit. Toodles, young ladies. Also, don't worry, that gas grenade is non-lethal even for your delicate constitutions, Philip says while still invisible. Even as smoke begins to follow down through the hole in the ceiling, like a finger of choking poison reaching down. Philip reaches down and grabs Barley with ease, and there's a twisting of axiom. They're suddenly away, and in a ship that Barley hasn't seen before. Where are we? Our little ship here officially has a new name every time it leaves port. Currently, it's the Feline Ferocity. We've designed it with specialized storage that is basically an entirely different ship inside the main one. We took the idea from the Tri-Euro peoples and added a little bit of human absurdity to it, Philip says as he fades into view and starts to lead the way to a maintenance tunnel, and then a secondary panel is moved aside to access a cargo bay. The portal, if entered from this direction, leads to the secondary ship which controls the main one and allows control of our false pilot. If entered from the direction of the storage bay, it's just another storage bay that doubles the storage capacity. In case the ship is searched? Exactly. The ship is registered to a synth trader who does not exist, and is just a logic tree for basic takeoff, piloting, and conversation. Then the synth will seemingly focus when one of us starts talking through it. Philip answers as he leads Barley through the portal. Wood? Barley asks as his knuckles make contact with the floor. Homier and other things as well. Philip says, all right, but what about my family and, oh God, what am I going to tell them? That little speech you used to buy yourself time would be an excellent starting point, Philip says. You were in a close-range sniper fight with Captain November and still had time to hear and process the shit I was saying? Even though it was off the cuff, through a tiny hole in the ceiling and interrupted by laser blasts and scrambling? Yes, Philip answers. Good God, you're a scary one. I thought I had good ears. Nonsense. It's as you said, I tend to take insults with a bit of a grin. It's better for the soul not to be so serious after all. And you have excellent ears. Don't be so down on yourself. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to make sure Machi isn't having too much fun on the control couch. That boy is a troublemaker, Philip says, finally fading into visibility, and Barley's jaw drops when he sees the damage on the man. Grazing shots from railguns. How is he not pulp? What? November demands into her communicator as she tries to get her coughing under control. I'm sorry, ma'am. We've already searched the ships. There's no hint of them. The Cloaken are gone, and so is whatever short race the third was. They have to be. November is cut off as her lungs protest again, and she's forced to focus on breathing to her frustration. They have to be here. No ship has left, and nowhere near enough axiom has been consumed or disturbed in a way to suggest an inter-system teleport. They're still here. Be that as it may, we can't find them. We've searched every ship twice. A third search is unlikely to turn up anything more. Then lock it down again. This is absurd. November starts coughing again before she gathers axiom into her lungs and hawks up a fist-sized wad of off-color gray mucus. They're here, and we will catch them. Get that lump down to the biolabs for testing. Test it on the clone, too. I want to know if the human just gave us a weapon against their own species. Ma'am, the clone is blank. Adult or not, he has less cognitive capacity than a newborn. It still needs to breathe. Replicate that smoke and see if it chokes on it as I did, she orders. They're still here. I know they are. She wipes a nigh-invisible trail of spittle from her lip. The stealth suit was borderline useless against that human. And it had to be a human. They had showed up with super soldiers, and she'd eat her plasma sword if what she faced didn't qualify. But what was one doing here and why? Why Laveron? Why in the name of a small country that had surrendered its imperial power and ambitions? As soon as she properly churns the questions over, it makes sense. A transfer of power. Humans live short, violent, and passionate lives in cruel space. Yes, their previous monarch had been very soft and gentle with her power. But she was old. Likely this one served either an heir presumptive, someone looking to stage a coup, or a shadow part of the government. In the end, does it really matter which part of his government sent him? They were still dealing with a super soldier and assassin that has subverted part of their structure, had an unknown amount of information about them, and was so secure in their position over Lavaron that they had openly announced their conquest. Search the ships again. Get aggressive about it. We can soothe ruffled feathers later. Right now, we need results.